Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back, way back, to ancient Babylon, where the nights are warm, the ziggurats are tall, and the sky practically buzzes with quiet importance. You're standing under a velvet black canopy pricked with stars, and you can hear a low rustle of sandals on baked clay. Someone nearby adjusts their robe, carefully, respectfully, because it's almost time for the reading of the heavens. Up above, flickering oil lamps line the massive staircase of a step tower, and at the very top, high priests in draped linen robes are watching Jupiter do whatever Jupiter does. You squint up, maybe hoping for a glimpse of a shooting star. But here in Babylon, that's not just a nice surprise. It's a legal indicator. In this ancient city, celestial events can decide more than your fortune for the day. They can decide whether your neighbor owes you a goat, or if your irrigation channel counts as theft. You probably won't survive this place's legal system, unless you have a pocket astrologer and a deep working knowledge of planetary retrogrades. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we settle in, go ahead and post your location and what time you're listening. I love seeing how far we reach across the sleepy world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've arrived in Babylon around 1750 BCE. It's evening, and the air is still heavy from the day's sun, thick with the scent of clay and crushed herbs. The city stretches low and wide, its mud brick walls baking in residual heat. You tread carefully through crowded streets, past open-air stalls that are finally packing up after a long day of business. Figs, wool, scrolls, goat cheese, and fish with eyes that seem just a bit too judgmental. In the distance rises the ziggurat of Marduk, the city's skyscraping temple. It's the beating heart of the spiritual and political system here, and yes, the legal one too. Babylonian justice isn't confined to dingy backrooms or dusty courtrooms. Here, trials can be public performances and omens matter. People whisper about comets and eclipses the way you might chat about parking tickets or broken vending machines. As you climb the steps of the ziggurat, the light shifts subtly. Above you, the constellations will into position, slowly, majestically. Each priest atop the tower holds a tablet and a stylus, taking note of any sudden flares of brightness, any strange movement among the stars. You pass a trio murmuring about the constellation Suduan, associated with the god Ninurta. They say it twinkled ominously last night. Bad news for the merchant accused of shorting his barley weights. The sky is not just a backdrop. It's a co-author of the law. Here in Babylon, justice is tied to the divine, and the divine, rather conveniently, is broadcast nightly on the celestial network above your head. One of the high priest astrologers, a man with a long beard, gestures to the northeastern sky and murmurs a note about Venus being in a position unfavorable for civil disputes. You wonder briefly if that's a real thing or just a way to delay awkward cases. You duck inside the temple courtyard where some early scribes are preparing the legal docket for tomorrow's cases. The atmosphere smells of warm stone, burnt cedar, and ancient bureaucracy. Scrolls and clay tablets are everywhere, stacked haphazardly but with a logic only the temple archivists seem to understand. You get a glimpse of one case. A man named Lugal has accused his cousin of slandering him by calling him a stealer of sheep during a wedding feast. There are no cameras, of course, but there are witnesses and a recent lunar eclipse that, according to the temple astrologer, suggests Lugal may be telling the truth. Historians still argue whether this reliance on astrology was merely symbolic or if it truly influenced judgments in a practical sense. But standing here, watching how each decision is accompanied by star readings, dream interpretations, and chicken liver inspections. Yes, really, you start to think, this wasn't just for show. The legal code itself, the Code of Hammurabi, is famous for its eye for an eye structure, but less famous for how often the stars came into play behind the scenes. It's not written in the laws, but everyone knows. If Mars is angry, today is not the day to accuse your neighbor of trespassing. As the evening continues, you drift into a corner near a young apprentice scribe trying to copy a legal form. He's yawning, repeatedly, but still carving each tiny cuneiform wedge into the soft clay with incredible precision. His teacher taps the edge of the tablet when he drifts off for too long. It's a long night for them both. Just then, a low horn sounds from the top of the ziggurat, a signal that Jupiter has moved out of Scorpio, which might mean nothing to you, but to the man being tried tomorrow for watering his field on a forbidden day, it might mean everything. Somewhere nearby, a priest recites a quiet chant to the moon god Sin. You let your eyes close for a moment, hearing only the slow rhythm of the words and the far-off bleat of a goat who is, frankly, just trying to mind his business. You blink awake, just a bit, because something odd is happening in the temple courtyard. A few citizens are filing in, carefully balancing scrolls, baskets, and, is that a broken plow? Yes, it is. You shuffle forward with the others and soon find yourself seated under a slanted roof, the edges trimmed with dangling bundles of dried herbs meant to ward off confusion or lawsuits. Either way, the early morning light is soft, but the temperature is already rising. Dust clings to your robe. A priest in copper-trimmed robes clears his throat and calls the first case. And just like that, Babylon's daily drama begins. So what exactly counts as a lawsuit in 1750 BCE? Well, practically everything. A farmer named Idunsin rises and presents his complaint. His neighbor diverted a canal, causing Idunsin's date palms to shrivel like undersalted stew meat. The accused frowns deeply and insists the water gods must have just been in a mood. You're not sure how convincing that is, but that's the thing. Babylonian justice includes floods, family feuds, celestial patterns, and yes, possibly cranky river spirits. The crowd listens politely, as the priest scribes each person's statement into wet clay. You spot a case about a borrowed ox that looked tired and then died. Another about an apprentice who claimed his master's house spirit gave him bad dreams. And then there's a real showstopper. Two brothers arguing over a dead relative's left sandal. Just the left one. You might chuckle, but these cases are serious. Babylonian society was ruled by the belief in me, the divine order of things. When something goes out of balance, a stolen cow, an unfair marriage dowry, it isn't just a personal dispute. It's a tear in the fabric of cosmic justice. And sometimes the only way to patch that tear is with a good star reading. The priests do not act alone, of course. Every case brings a ritual rhythm. The plaintiff speaks, the accused responds, witnesses murmur, and finally, the gods are consulted. This isn't just about who shouted louder. It's about whether the divine rhythm agrees with your story. Did Venus rise calmly that morning? Was the moon waning or waxing? Did a raven fly left over the canal? One particularly long trial involves a merchant who was accused of shorting someone on silver weight. The tablets record the exact weight of silver, the scales used, and, of course, the planetary alignments on the day of the transaction. According to the court astrologer, Mars was excessively bold at the time, a bad omen for contracts. The merchant's defense? He was born under the sign of the goatfish, and such a mistake would be cosmically beneath him. You suppress a yawn. Still, the logic is oddly soothing. Everything matters. Everything is connected. Even if you've never seen Jupiter before, it might still weigh in on whether you owe someone 3 jars of fermented locust paste. Historians still debate the exact legal weight of astrology in these trials. Some argue it was more ceremonial, a public way to show the gods were watching. Others suggest that high-stakes cases, especially those involving temple lands or royal officials, were absolutely at the mercy of celestial omens. What's clear is that these weren't haphazard rulings. There was method in the mysticism. The priests maintained archives, real archives, with references to past omens and how similar disputes had been resolved under similar skies. So if a man once lost his sheep and Mercury was in retrograde, and now your sheep is missing under the same celestial condition, well, prepare to be disappointed. You start to notice a rhythm in the courtroom, like waves washing up and retreating. The priest listens. The complainant gestures. The astrologer squints at a wax tablet covered in constellations. And every now and then, a judgment is rendered with calm, clipped formality. One man bows his head, visibly relieved. Another leaves muttering, possibly already planning his appeal to the moon goddess. Then there's a more dramatic case. A woman named Ninsana accuses her sister of stealing her ceremonial earrings. The sister gasps theatrically, proclaims her innocence, and points skyward, toward the morning star. "Let Ishtar judge me," she declares. A bold move, invoking the goddess of both war and love. The priest raises an eyebrow and notes the planetary position. Apparently, Venus had just entered the house of judgment. You wonder what happens if the stars don't favor either side. Do they reschedule? Flip a carved shell? Offer up a goat and try again tomorrow? As it turns out, yes. Cases were sometimes postponed due to unfavorable omens. Babylonian lawyers, if you could call them that, had to be astronomers, diplomats, and patient meditators. Not exactly law and order, but deeply charming in its own way. The courtroom clears slowly, with many lingering just to hear the final star reports. Some say a new comet was spotted last night. Others argue it was a bird with shiny feathers. Either way, it's going to be a long day for whoever forgot to pay their barley rent. You wander back toward the temple steps, watching scribes carefully pack away clay tablets into woven baskets. No need for filing cabinets when your records are the size and shape of a chunky cookie. A boy drops one, curses under his breath, and begins rewriting it with resigned precision. As the sun rises higher, the sky seems less mysterious. But for the Babylonians, daylight is no escape from divine justice. The stars may have vanished from sight, but their influence lingers like the aftertaste of that suspiciously sour cheese you bought yesterday. A little strange, slightly off, but somehow still part of the order of things. You find yourself seated on a worn stone bench just outside the inner courtyard now, catching your breath as a procession of officials enters. Their robes are more elaborate than those of the petitioners, a sure sign they're not here to complain about a missing donkey. These are the judges, but they don't look stern or angry. Honestly, most of them look like they haven't slept properly in days. And no wonder. Being a Babylonian judge isn't about memorizing laws and waving gavels around. It's about reading the skies, understanding sacred rituals, and occasionally inspecting a sheep's liver at dawn. Because here, justice doesn't begin with testimony, it begins with Jupiter. One of the judges, a silver-bearded man who chews licorice root as if it owes him money, beckons to a priest astrologer. They consult a wooden tablet engraved with planetary cycles. Venus is in Capricorn, Mercury has gone direct, and Mars is frowning. Metaphorically, sort of. The astrologer nods grimly, then adjusts the hem of his robe and declares that the skies are sufficiently neutral for hearings to resume. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Neutral sounds nice. Neutral sounds safe. Today's case. A boundary dispute between two landowners. It's the classic "your ox trampled my barley" sort of affair. But what really elevates it is that the boundary in question was supposedly marked during an eclipse, some 14 years ago. And according to Babylonian logic, eclipses are tricky. They can distort divine truth. It's like trying to settle a fence line during a cosmic sneeze. The judges call for witnesses, but before anyone speaks, they all glance skyward. A raven crosses overhead from east to west. A scribe casually notes the direction. The testimony proceeds. As each side presents their version of the story, the judge consults a wax tablet filled with prior omens. There's a reference to a shadowy moon that once signaled dishonesty, and another note about the rare alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, an event believed to indicate legal reversals. So, if a man was once proven innocent under that alignment, today he might be seen as guilty depending on the current heavenly tilt. You can't help but admire the logic. It's bewildering, but it's deeply consistent. The Babylonian system assumes the cosmos is trying to help you, if only you learn its language. Historians still argue whether this reliance on planetary advice was truly binding, or if it merely provided a veneer of cosmic legitimacy over decisions already shaped by politics, bribery, or personal grudges. But in the records, stars are cited just as often as witnesses. In one case, a tablet includes a note that reads, "Venus was bright in the early morning. Verdict: justice favors the elder brother." This might sound absurd to modern ears, but imagine trying to explain internet algorithms to a Babylonian. Well, the great algorithm saw you liked a goat meme, so now it thinks you want more goat-related content, and possibly goat insurance. Not so different, really. Back inside the courtroom, the land dispute becomes heated. One man insists the original property line extended to the edge of the tamarisk grove. The other shouts that the grove didn't exist when the agreement was made. A third witness insists everyone is wrong, and that the land once belonged to a goat herd who was cursed by a jealous spirit. At this point, the judge slowly stands, raises his hand for silence, and declares a recess. Not for legal deliberation, for sky-checking. The courtyard clears slightly as a priest heads to the upper ziggurat platform, scroll in hand, ready to cross-check the current star positions with prior omens. There is no sense of hurry. Justice waits for Jupiter. Meanwhile, down below, you follow another judge into a quiet side chamber. It's cooler here, and the shelves are lined with baked clay tablets. Legal precedents going back generations. He selects one that records a dispute over stolen fishing nets, dated precisely to a day when the moon was veiled and Saturn was angry. The verdict had leaned toward the thief, oddly enough. It was later overturned when Saturn returned to a more generous mood. That brings up an important question. How often did verdicts change? Were rulings ever reversed because the stars decided to change their minds? Apparently, yes. There are cases where a judgment was reconsidered after a solar eclipse, especially if the eclipse occurred within 7 days of the decision. 7 days. You try imagining your modern court case being delayed by a cloudy night and a crabby full moon. Back in the courtyard, the astrologer has returned. The verdict is finally rendered. The original agreement, dated under an eclipse, is deemed void of clear celestial intent. In other words, they'll have to re-establish the boundary under better starlight. Both men nod, not exactly thrilled, but at least they understand. You glance at the court scribe, who's casually carving the entire exchange into clay. There's no urgency in his motions. He's written hundreds of these, and he'll probably write hundreds more. His stylus clicks rhythmically, tick, 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 like a soft metronome for cosmic bureaucracy. Another judge stretches, groans slightly, and drinks from a long-handled ladle. You suspect there's barley beer in there, though technically it's against temple policy before noon. But then again, if Venus approves, who's going to object? A final thought crosses your mind as the judges rise to leave. In a society where justice is tied to the stars, does that make every court clerk a kind of stargazer? Every plaintiff a hopeful astronomer? It's all delightfully tangled, predictable even in its own celestial rhythm. The sun is now overhead, and the shadows grow short. A goat wanders past, possibly unaware it is once again the center of someone's lawsuit. The judge gives it a curious look. You just smile and settle in deeper against the warm stone. The afternoon heat drapes over the temple complex like a heavy linen blanket. The stone beneath you is warm enough to bake flatbread. But inside the temple archives, thick-walled, dimly lit, and lined with shelves upon shelves of clay tablets, there's a different kind of heat, the soft, unrelenting smolder of intellectual obsession. You shuffle through a low archway and enter the scriptorium, where rows of apprentice scribes are hunched over clay slabs, copying laws with the dutiful despair of students who know they'll be doing this for the next 10 years. The room smells of scorched earth, lamp oil, and sweaty resolve. A few scribes are mumbling to themselves, trying to remember which cuneiform wedge goes with recompense. You settle into a spot near the back, careful not to knock over a reed pen or smudge a still-drying tablet. There's no parchment here, no ink, just clay, styluses, and unyielding patience. This is the record-keeping engine behind Babylonian law. These scribes don't write justice. They preserve it. A master scribe, robed in deep blue, strolls down the line, occasionally pausing to correct a crooked mark. He murmurs a prayer to Nabu, the god of wisdom and writing, under his breath like a sleepy mantra. The light from a trio of oil lamps flickers across his face, casting long shadows that dance along the curved walls. You notice that the scribes all have ink-stained fingernails and that peculiar tilt of the head common to anyone who's been reading tiny symbols for 6 hours straight. Today's assignment? Copying segments of Hammurabi's code. Yes, that Hammurabi, the king whose massive stone pillar of laws has been misquoted by modern parents for centuries. If you hit your brother, he hits you back. Hammurabi said so. But the real code is subtler, messier, and far more sleep-inducing in its detail. You peer over a student's shoulder. He's painstakingly carving a clause that regulates fees for boat pilots depending on the depth of the river and the lunar cycle. That's right, Babylonian boating law involved the moon. Because of course it did. One mainstream historical fact often overlooked is how comprehensive these codes were. Not just criminal law, but civil disputes, pricing models, marriage contracts, even the proper return rate on a borrowed donkey. And it all had to be recorded, in triplicate, with star dates. The scribes don't just copy laws, though. They update records, transcribe trials, and file omens alongside verdicts. Each case heard earlier this morning is now being slowly immortalized in clay. One apprentice is currently struggling with a record from the land dispute. He's added a note at the bottom that reads, "Venus appeared pale at dawn. No birds," which is either a summary of the trial or a very niche weather report. Historians still argue whether scribes had personal biases, if certain temple schools trained their apprentices to favor particular star omens, or if local politics colored their interpretations. One odd tablet found in the ruins of Sippar includes a snarky footnote that essentially translates to, "This decision was made under Mercury. I warned them." You move deeper into the archives now, past older shelves with cracked tablets stacked like lasagna made of earth. A senior archivist pulls one from the pile and blows off the dust. It's a case from decades ago involving a baker who accused his neighbor of stealing exactly half a fig cake. The verdict involved 2 nights of stargazing and a dream analysis, after which the accused was fined 3 goats and a public apology. The archivist chuckles and places it gently back. "People always think their problems are new," he mutters. You nod, pretending you understand Akkadian, which you absolutely do not. Somewhere nearby, a scribe drops his stylus. It clatters on the stone, and a few heads turn, scandalized. He mutters an apology and resumes his work, now with the added stress of knowing that his slip-up will probably be noted in tomorrow's omens. A breeze drifts in through a small window slit high in the wall, carrying with it the smell of baking bread and distant goats. The flicker of lamps begins to soften as the light outside turns amber. Work slows. The scribes begin to lean back, stretch their cramped fingers, and rub their ink-smudged temples. One of them lets out a truly heroic yawn. It's a good time to take stock of what's happened today. Dozens of cases, hundreds of wedge marks, thousands of stars considered. All of it woven into a quietly humming machine of cosmic legality. Even now, scribes are debating the best phrasing for a dispute involving a haunted granary. The question isn't whether ghosts exist. It's whether the haunted state of the granary absolves the tenant of back payment. Spoiler, probably not. You glance one last time at a drying tablet. It holds a minor verdict involving a spilled jug of sesame oil, 2 conflicting witness statements, and a faint meteor seen in the north sky. The ruling? Partial refund plus a blessing from the priest of Nergal, just in case the meteor meant something ominous. The head scribe calls out a soft dismissal. Everyone exhales at once, like deflating wineskins. Clay tablets are gently lifted, carried to the kiln room for baking. The smell of warm earth grows stronger. You follow the line of apprentices as they file out, past shelves filled with generations of human arguments. Some noble, some petty, all deeply poetic in their concern for justice, fairness, and celestial clarity. You exit through a back corridor, feeling the weight of all that history, still damp with drying verdicts. A pigeon coos from the roof. Somewhere, a priest checks the color of the evening clouds for signs of divine irritation. And you wonder if anyone ever just flipped a coin. Outside, twilight has rolled in like thick, plum-colored silk. The temple torches are being lit one by one, and the rooftops glow softly in the last orange blush of daylight. You follow a narrow footpath toward the edge of the city, where a smaller shrine sits quietly under the open sky. This one doesn't house grand statues or heavy archives. It's where the really strange legal work happens, the part where the stars don't just influence decisions. They practically make them. Tonight, You're joining a group of temple astrologers who specialize in translating celestial alignments into legal strategy. Think of them as a mix between lawyers, weather forecasters, and very dramatic stargazers. You arrive just in time to hear one of them declare, "Jupiter is trembling in the house of the Archer." That means it's not a good night to resolve sibling disputes. A nearby priest nods solemnly, as though Jupiter's emotional state is a matter of public record. You settle cross-legged on a cushion as a small fire crackles nearby. An astrologer begins reading from a clay tablet, a case in which two rival fishmongers both claim ownership of a river inlet. The tablet outlines not just the timeline of their arguments, but also a string of celestial movements. Mars passed through the tail of Pisces, Saturn was in retrograde, and a particularly flashy meteor zoomed overhead the night one of the boats was mysteriously set adrift. Coincidence? Not in Babylon. The crowd murmurs as the astrologer explains how each alignment pointed toward dishonesty. On both sides. The eventual ruling? They both had to give up fishing rights for 3 lunar cycles, after which a new reading would determine the righteous inheritor of the river. Babylonian justice. Come for the verdict, stay for the sequel. It might sound bizarre, but it has a certain logic. If the gods are truly involved in daily life, then why wouldn't they use their planetary puppets to express judgment? The heavens become a sort of divine courtroom, where Saturn plays the curmudgeonly judge, Venus the romantic defense attorney, and Mercury. Well, Mercury's probably running late with coffee. As the astrologer unrolls a second tablet, he presents a case that borders on pure comedy. A farmer accused his neighbor of using star magic to spoil his onions. The neighbor insisted it was just bad soil. To settle the case, the priest read the omens and concluded that because the moon had vanished behind a cloud when the accusation was first made, the onions were cosmically blameless. The farmer was fined 2 loaves of barley bread for excessive dramatics. You find yourself smiling. Still, beneath the gentle absurdity lies something remarkably consistent. These decisions, whimsical though they seem, are part of an ongoing effort to bring order to a deeply chaotic world. Babylon wasn't exactly a stress-free place. There were floods, plagues, wars, and the occasional goat uprising. By anchoring legal decisions in the predictable patterns of the sky, Babylonians could find comfort, even when outcomes were unclear. Historians still debate how seriously people took these astrological rulings. Some say it was mostly symbolic, a nod to the gods before delivering a predecided judgment. Others believe these readings could actually reverse a decision already made, especially in rural areas where written laws were less accessible than the night sky. You lean back on your elbows and stare upward. The stars above Babylon are extraordinary, unfettered by light pollution or satellite traffic. You can see constellations you've only ever read about in museum gift shop books. The plow, the goatfish, the sitting dog. All of them hold symbolic weight in Babylonian thought. Each flicker, each tiny movement might mean a new omen, a shift in fate, or just a goat wandering too close to the astrologer's campfire again. The next case involves a widow whose son vanished during a harvest festival. No witnesses, no clear suspect, but the astrologers consult a recent lunar chart and determine that a partial eclipse occurred 2 nights before his disappearance. Combined with a rare crimson sunrise, this pointed, somehow, toward foul play by a jealous cousin. Whether or not the cousin was truly guilty, he was ordered to present a sheep to the goddess Ishtar and remain in ritual isolation for a month, just to be safe. At some point, it occurs to you that the astrologers are not just star readers. They're therapists, mediators, and improv artists rolled into one. Their goal isn't to punish, it's to restore harmony. Every sentence, every omen reading is about balance. You start to understand why someone would accept being fined for something the stars blamed them for. After all, who argues with Saturn? You stretch out a little, the stone beneath you cool now in the evening breeze. One of the priests offers you a fig and a date. You accept them, chewing slowly as the final trial of the night begins. A property inheritance split among 5 brothers. The twist? The father died under an unkind moon, meaning the property might carry ill fortune unless properly redistributed. A heated discussion follows. Charts are consulted. An owl hoots ominously. Eventually, the decision is made. The youngest brother will inherit the house, but only after walking around it 3 times during the next meteor shower. It's less about logic, more about ritual insurance. As the brothers grumble and bow, the astrologer rolls up his final scroll and mutters, "Justice has been served with garnish." You suspect this is an inside joke. No one laughs, but you do spot a tiny smirk on the mouth of the scribe recording the whole exchange. The stars are high now, bright and sharp. The cases are done. The priests begin to pack up, murmuring about omens to watch for tomorrow. You hear something about a suspicious alignment between Mercury and a cluster of faint stars known as the Scorpion's beard. You stand, brush off your robe, and begin walking back toward the temple. Somewhere in the night, a goat bleats dramatically, possibly out of protest, possibly out of guilt. You don't judge. That's the stars' job. So now, with Babylon quiet behind you, let the night soften everything. Let your shoulders relax, and your breath slow to match the rhythm of the stars above. You've walked across temple courtyards, listened to cosmic arguments, and learned how ancient justice once echoed through clay tablets and constellations. Imagine the warm stone beneath you again, the scent of fig and frankincense lingering in the air. Picture the soft flicker of oil lamps guiding the scribe's hands, and the steady, gentle scrape of styluses carving words that would last for centuries. Let your thoughts drift like those old astrologers' eyes, tracing the shapes in the sky. You don't have to know the names. You don't have to make a case. Just be still, and let the patterns settle into your breath. Slow, steady, and certain. The Babylonians may be gone, but their stars remain. Their stories, their trials, their odd little goatfish omens. They're all part of the night now, part of the quiet. So rest easy. You're not on trial. There's no verdict to wait for. The stars, for tonight, are calm. And as the last embers of the temple torches fade, you let go of the world, of the questions, of the clay and the courts. You're safe here, cradled in time, wrapped in starlight. Sleep well.